We're making a sort of a historical sketch of everything that I've done in the present and past, and it's for the next generation and their grandchildren and so forth. So hopefully this will be for posterity. Well, I was born in Elgin, Illinois, May the 12th, 1928, which also was Mother's Day. And we lived right across the street from my grandmother Page and right next door to my grandmother Kunke. So we had both sides of the family. And if my mother couldn't take care of me after school, I'd go to one of them and play bunco and eat sugar bread. Had a lot of fun. Stayed in Elgin until I was in the 7th grade, and we moved up to Minneapolis. And we lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota for a couple of years. And the big event up there was that we kids were playing football on November 11th, bright sunny day, and all of a sudden the clouds came in, it started to rain, we all went in the house, the rain changed to snow. It was the first day of hunting, and all of the hunters were out in the fields hunting for pheasant and what have you. And it snowed, and they all left and got in their car, and pretty soon the snow covered up the car exhaust, and a lot of the hunters were dying in their cars from the fumes from the exhaust. And then the snow plows came along, and they couldn't see the cars because the snow was covering the cars, and it piled more snow. And women knew that their husbands were out and dead, but they didn't know where they were. And it was the following April before the snow melted enough for them to find the cars parked on the side of the highway or out in the fields. It's known as the Great Blizzard of 1939, I think. My dad graduated from the University of Illinois. He went into the Marine Corps when he was 17 in World War I. Went over to Europe, and he was standing in the rain, and they asked if anybody knew how to type, and he was one of several that said yes. They took him inside, and he spent the rest of the war inside typing up papers, including his own discharge paper. But he was a spokesman for the Marine Corps all during World War II. He had two brothers, Uncle Charlie and Uncle David, and one sister, Aunt Agnes. Each of the four of them had one child each. So I had cousin Jack, cousin Adele, and cousin Francis. My mother was of German descent. She spoke German fluently. And when Dad and Mother were first married, they went to the Lutheran Church. And after church, my father said, well, Irma, I can't go to that church. And she said, why not? She said, because the service is in German, and I don't speak German. So they never went back to the Lutheran Church, but that was kind of neat. Mother was a real homebody, but she also helped out down at Rocket Coal and Condition Air. He had a coal company, and he also owned a heating and air conditioning company, and she did a lot of the filing and was very, very helpful. But being an only child, they were highly supportive. Dad had a 16mm camera, and every time I got involved in some sort of an outdoor game where he could use the camera, he was out there taking pictures, and I really appreciated them. Later on in 1957, when I moved down to DeLand, I had told them that I'd hoped to start my own insurance agency sometime. And by the time they came to DeLand in 1961 or 62, I was headed in that direction. And finally, when we established the Don Page Agency, they came to work for me. So it was a happy way for them to retire. We left Minneapolis, and I came down to Peoria, Illinois with my folks and entered Columbia Junior High in the 8th grade. And in the 9th grade, they elected a president for the school, and each homeroom made a nomination, and my homeroom nominated me. And when the election ballots were counted, I ended up being president of Columbia Junior High. From Columbia Junior High, I went to Peoria High School. I entered as a sophomore, and one day, walking down a hall, this pretty girl came up to me and said, I'd like you to be my date for the junior prom. I didn't know anything about that, and I said, well, that'd be fine with me. It turned out she was president of the junior class, which made her queen of the junior prom, and by being her date, I became king of the junior prom. I didn't know if to come in out of the rain. It was a formal occasion held down at the Armory, and it was a walk around the gym. We had the two of us started out and walked all by ourselves in our tuxedo and formal gowns. When we got to the end, we turned and came around, and we picked up another couple, and then we were 4, 8, and so forth until the whole thing ended. But it was quite an honor. I had my picture in the Peoria newspapers, and my parents were very proud of me. By the time I got out of Peoria High School, I had been captain of the football team, elected vice president of the senior class, and I earned 8 letters in sports, 2 in football, 2 in basketball, 2 in baseball, 1 in golf, and 3 in baseball and 1 in golf. And the baseball team, my sophomore year, made it to the state tournament. We lost our first game. The basketball team, my junior year, made it to the Sweet 16. We went down to the University of Illinois, played in their gymnasium, dribbled the ball out the first day and stopped cold. We were playing in front of 10,000 people. We'd been used to playing in front of a couple hundred people. At any rate, we won our first game, and we were in the final 8 before we were eliminated. But I always thought that was quite something to have played on a team. The reason I say it was quite something, Michael Jordan was asked one time if he ever had any regrets about basketball, and he said yes. I went to high school for 4 years in Chicago, and my high school team never made it to the Sweet 16 in Champaign, and I thought to myself, well, I'm one up on Michael Jordan, but that's the only way I was one up. When I left Peoria High, I entered DePaul University, Greencastle, Indiana. And the only athletics down there, I was in the Beta Theta Pi fraternity. I made a letter my freshman, junior, and freshman, sophomore, and junior year in baseball. And my senior year, I got senioritis, and I went out for the golf team and had a good time. Graduated from DePaul University in 1950. Entered graduate school at Bradley University in Peoria. My dad let me off work to go to classes, and by the end of the year, which was June of 1951, I had earned my MBA degree. I stayed in Bradley all during summer school and on into the next semester, and by the time it was June of 1952, I'd earned my MA in economics and started to teach a little bit at Bradley. By that time, I was married, and in July of 1952, we had our first baby, Francis. July of 1953, we had our second baby, Charlotte, and it was 1955 before we had David. So we had 3 children in a pretty short period of time. Well, things really popped when we got down to DeLand, Florida. I was working for the Conrad Insurance Agency, and the insurance company in North America, which was a large company, started a sales contest, and they had 5 major prizes, all of which were trips to Disneyland in California. And one of the major prizes was the leading producer of life insurance. They had 17,000 life insurance agents. And I'm very proud to say that I ended up leading the nation in sales, and my family and I flew to California, and we had a good time at Disneyland. the kids all enjoyed Lassie and Zorro and all the things that were going on at that time. But an unusual event. We earned that because the fish hospitals in DeLand and in New Smyrna were putting in a retirement plan, and it was granted to the Conrad Agency, and my job was to get a couple of guys from Tampa Life office to come up and help me. And we worked all 3 shifts. A lot of times we didn't start at a hospital until 12 or 1 in the morning to write up the people that were in the 3rd shift. But the insurance company in North America was not too happy having a winter in DeLand, Florida, and they called the boys down in Tampa and said, we want a winter in Chicago or New York or somewhere where we can really exploit it. And they said, well, we're sorry, but we just sent you 20 apps last night for life insurance. And the guy said, okay, we've got a winner in DeLand, Florida. But it was a great opportunity for our children, and they really did enjoy it. After working for Conrad Agency about 7 years, 1964, I think it was, I was elected a city commissioner in DeLand. And in 1965, I started the Page Insurance Agency and left Conrad. By the time my 4-year term had expired, which was 1968, I had divorced and remarried. And in November of 67, I married Barbara Rudder. And in December of that year, I was elected president of the Noon Rotary Club, and they in turn said, well, you've got to go to the Rotary International Convention. It's down in Mexico City. So on May the 12th, 1968, I celebrated my 40th birthday, and I was in Mexico City with my new bride. I thought that was kind of highlight of being out of DeLand, at least for a while. When we got back, and this sort of gets us into travel momentarily, our insurance company, Auto Owners Mutual, was starting a series of trips based on production. And in that time, there were so many people coming to Florida that getting new business was not difficult at all, and the agency was growing rather rapidly. And the first trip, we had to win this, of course, but they would charge $300 or $400 for me to take Barbara along. The first trip was to Spain, and we were in Spain for 7 days. And then it would be about 18 months later, they had another trip, and this one was to London for 5 days and Paris for 5 days. And then we got back from that, and they started another trip, and this time we went to Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and up the Rhine in a Rhine cruise boat to Switzerland. 18 months later, we went to Munich in Germany, Kitzbühel in Vienna, and Venice in Italy. And I think our final trip with them was to Rome, to the Isle of Capri, and finally around to Yugoslavia on a boat. So we really enjoyed that. By that time, I was also on a series of trips by American states, and they were doing island hopping. And Barbara and I went to Bermuda, we went to Jamaica, we went to Puerto Rico, and we went to Hawaii. So we had a really great time. Our son David was located down in St. Thomas, and we'd go down there and be on the boat with he and his wife. So we got a chance to do quite a bit of traveling. We also went up to Alaska and took a trip of our own back to England to see Barbara's relatives. So from that standpoint, now getting away from travel, in 1968, I said I'd started in the Rotary Club, and we went several years, and we started the Breakfast Rotary Club, and I was one of the founding directors of that. And a year after it was started, I was elected president of the Breakfast Rotary Club. So I think to this date, I'm still the only person that's been president of both the Noon Club and the Breakfast Club. Backing up a bit, in 1953, I helped start the DeLand State Bank. And I was one of it turned out I was the first president of the bank, because the president, Wendell Gerard, was up in Tallahassee. That was sort of a token prize, you might say, but I was one of the founding directors, and the banks did quite well. And finally, at a later date, SunTrust Bank came along and bought us out. So that was a plus for the city of DeLand. Stetson University said to me, would you come teach insurance and real estate? They knew that I had a couple of master's degrees, and so I was teaching insurance and real estate, and they put me on the board of the School of Business Foundation, and on 2 or 3 occasions I was elected president of that group. So that was a nice thing to do. But overall, the city of DeLand has been very kind and very generous to me, and I've enjoyed doing it. When we got around to buying the Conrad Agency, the CPAs put the sales together, and to my surprise, even though they had started back in the 40s, the Don Page Agency was larger than they were. And we bought them out, retired their stock, and there was no more Conrad Agency. And the Page Agency, by this time, with the combined sales, we're doing a little over $3 million a year, considering that we started in 65. I said 53 for the bank. It was 63 for the bank. And we were very, very pleased to be that large. Well, by the time I sold it, we were doing about $5 million a year. And a couple of years back, I asked how they were doing, and their sales were now up to $20 million a year. And they had a couple of agencies over in Holly Hill and Ormond Beach. So the corporation is still intact. It's still called, corporate-wise, Don Page Agency, Inc. However, for a team effort, they refer to it as the Page Agency. I was the city commissioner from 64 to 68. Sid Smith was the mayor at that time. He served for the next 4 years. I did not run for re-election. As a matter of fact, I've never been defeated in running for political office, primarily because I only run for 1 term and I don't seek re-election. But Sid came to me around 1973, and he said, I'd like you to run for mayor. He said, I've started a bunch of things. I don't want to be mayor anymore. I've been mayor for 8 years. And he said, let's do it this way. I will not announce to the public that I am not going to run for mayor. And the first day that it's possible to sign up, you go down and sign up and announce to the city that you are going to run for mayor. We thought that we could block everybody out, but on the last possible day, one of the students from Embry-Riddle signed up to run for mayor, so I did have to campaign. Fortunately, I defeated him, and I was mayor of DeLand from 1973 to 1977, and in 1976, the city celebrated its centennial, and the country celebrated its bicentennial. So it was a very patriotic time. We were issuing proclamations and doing all sorts of things, but I was always very, very proud to do that. Shortly after retiring as mayor of DeLand, I was elected president of the Committee of 100, which is a group of businessmen looking at the future of DeLand and how we can improve it. And that turned out to be a nice year. We tried to help the businesses that we already had, and I think they appreciated that. By the time I sold the Page Agency, I got a call from Stetson University saying that they would like me to come into their development department and help them raise money. Well, I told them I didn't know anything about that, and they said they would teach me. So for 7 or 8 years, I worked at Stetson, particularly for the athletic department, trying to raise money. And that, when I finally retired, I had raised $975,000. And I wanted to make it $1 million, but it didn't quite work out that way. And one great benefit from that was that I was a retired employee and eligible for their group insurance. And group insurance is still a problem to obtain, but we're still part of the Stetson University group plan. Pay them a sum every month for that. So all in all, it's been very pleasant in DeLand. I've got one other insurance sale that I'd like to talk about. They built a 16-story high-rise here in DeLand after I started the Page Agency. And Francis Whitehair sent a notice out to the various agencies saying he wanted $2,200,000 worth of insurance on the building and give him a quote. Well, I wasn't satisfied with that because I'd watched the building go up, and I saw a great big hole in the ground, and a tractor was down there. It was so low you couldn't see it from the road. You had to go up and look down, and that was the foundation for that big building. So I went to their office in what I called the Whitehair building, and I said, could I see the specifications for this building? Well, the first thing I saw was $500,000 for the foundation. Well, you don't insure the foundation. The other thing was $100,000 for prepaid interest or prepaid principal, and that was not insurable. So I wrote him a letter, and I told him what I was doing, and I said, I've taken $600,000 off of your request for a bid because, and I gave him the thing out of the specifications. Well, obviously my bid was low. Instead of going back out and getting more bids at a lower price, Mr. Whitehair gave the business to the Page Agency. Whereupon, and Mr. Conrad was still alive, he called and complained that there was prejudice or something going on, and Mr. Whitehair didn't like that. So he called a meeting of all the agents, the Lanes, the Goulds, Conrads, and what have you, and he had a big office with flags on either side. He looked like the governor of the state of Florida, and he sat down and told his relationship with the Gould Agency and the Conrad Agency and the Marshall Lane Agency. And he said, the only agency I have no relationship with is the Don Page Agency. And he said, I have a complaint that I was showing favoritism. If I was going to do that, I would have done it with one of the older agencies. But he said, in all fairness, and now here's my competition, he said, Don Page just outsmarted you all. He came up with the idea not to insure the foundation and not to insure the prepaid interest. And he said, I was happy to give him the business just because he was aggressive enough to look it up. Well, the meeting ended, and we had to all get in the elevator, and it was kind of quiet going down with all these guys in there, having been told that I had outsmarted them. But I was very pleased. We had that business insured for a long, long time. When I married Barbara, her family had a cottage up in Black Mountain, North Carolina. Her aunt had been a painter, and she had a lot of paintings up there. And so every time that we wanted to take a cheap vacation, we put the kids in the car, we go to Black Mountain, take a bunch of books out of the library, had an old black and white TV, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. Well, later on, we had one bathroom, and we just had too many people coming, so we sold that place and bought another place on the side of the mountain, really on the other side of the interstate, in Charmel D. Acres. That house has proven to be delightful. It's at an elevation of 2,500 upward 2,500 or much higher, and we look west into the setting sun and at 2 or 3 mountain ranges and down on the lights of Black Mountain. Barbara and I have both joined the Black Mountain Kiwanis Club, and I am on the board of trustees of the Christian Ministries in Black Mountain. They seem to be primarily operated by people in Kiwanis, and last year we volunteered in the Kiwanis thrift shop, which is a lot of fun, and we got a certificate when we were ready to come back to DeLand, stating that we had each volunteered 92 hours at the thrift shop. Thrift shop donates to the downtown nonprofit businesses, including the Christian Ministry, upward of $100,000 a year. And they bought their own building. They're paying off a mortgage. Once the mortgage is paid off, they'll be putting more than $100,000 into the municipality. It's a great place to work, and we have a lot of friends up there right now. I have a little bit of advice. First of all, there's an old book written back in the 1930s called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And one of the things they say in that book is always talk to another person about that person, and you'll be surprised at how many friends you make. And always smile and be pleasant. And then they have a whole bunch of things. If you're going to go into sales, I recommend you go to the library and read 2 or 3 books on salesmanship. They're mostly written by life insurance people, but it is such a help when you get down. For instance, I had a sale one time where I was bidding on heating and air conditioning for a doctor, and it was $4,000 or $5,000 heating and air conditioning job. He drove up in front of Condition Air and parked his great big Chrysler, and we were the Chrysler dealer for heating and air conditioning. He came back to my office and he started to tell me that my bid was too high, that he could go down and get the sheet metal shop to do it for less, and he could buy the product wholesale, and on and on and on, and he stopped. And I said to him, well, when you came to see us, doctor, you drove in a great big Chrysler. So why didn't you buy a Plymouth? Dead silence. He looked at me and he said, you son of a gun, go ahead and write it up. That was one of the best sales I made as far as I was concerned. The other thing is, Barbara and I have been rather frugal, and we at one time had $150,000 or $60,000 in debt. Anytime that we got a bonus check or a larger check, we paid off notes. We didn't take it to buy cars or to be extravagant. And eventually we had the house paid for at 722 Pine Tree Court. Barbara paid off my first wife and her husband for the investment that she had in the property. And sooner or later, we got the mortgage paid for. And then when we sold the place, we bought a house out on Lake Winnimisset, which is where this is being filmed. And the lake that's behind me in your background is Lake Winnimisset. The property is something like 1,700 feet long and goes all the way to the middle of the lake and up. I'm sure we'll have a picture of the house and an orange grove that's in the back. It's a delightful place to live. We always have sandhill cranes walking around, but any time that we got money, we paid off our debt. We didn't try to expand it. We watched what we did with credit cards. And so when it came time to retire, we were in fairly decent shape at that time. Of course, now inflation has changed all that, and we probably could have a lot more income than we have, but we're paying our bills and having a good time. Barbara had 4 children when I married her, and I had 3. So altogether, we raised 7 children, My daughter Frances got her PhD at Vanderbilt. My daughter Lily got her degree at Arizona State. David attended Stetson here in DeLand. Barbara's oldest daughter attended, I guess it's Daytona State now. The next daughter was Jennifer, and she graduated from Principia in Southern Illinois. Our daughter Duran went to Furman University and then went to South Carolina Law School with her husband. And Daryl graduated from Georgia Tech. So when I look at everybody's education, I wonder how I had any money to retire. Our family has stayed together pretty well, so that whenever I've talked to other people at Stetson, and they say, do you ever lend money to your children? And I say, yeah. Well, do you get them to pay it back? I said, yeah, they've always paid it back. And they said, well, I don't understand that. Mine don't pay me back. And I said, well, do you ask them to sign a note? Oh, heavens, no. I said, that's why they don't pay you back. Anytime that I loaned money to somebody in the family, I drew up a note, no interest, and had the wife as well as the husband sign it, and they always paid it back. Never had any problem with that. So you got to be businesslike. You can't expect your children to not be businesslike if you're not going to treat them businesslike. I guess the one thing that life doesn't prepare you for is getting divorced and getting remarried, and suddenly to have the responsibility of somebody else's children is not really in your plans for the future. Barbara's children, for the most part, have been great to me. Duran wrote me a letter one time telling me how much she loved me, how grateful she was for paying for her education. My children have always been great, and it's been interesting to have 7 children, and there's always something going on, some problem somewhere within the family. But now we have Valerie as a great-great-granddaughter, I guess, and so things are moving along. I'm 83, and May the 12th, I hope to be 84. Thank you.